Okay, good evening, everyone. It is Friday, April 28th, 6 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time, which is my time. Tonight, hey, we got a special event. We've got Scientia Perceptum and James Downard, and these two gentlemen have engaged with a guy named Joe, and I always butcher this guy's name. I'm butchered again. Cenkowski? Close
Pretty
enough.
good.
Yeah, we're pretty. We'll go with that. We'll call him Joe. And so Joe is a Young Earth Creationist that we've talked to for a while on Twitter, and Joe has some pretty bizarre claims. He has some standard ones, the typical Young Earth Creationist claims, which we're going to be starting off with, and then we're going to lead into his more off-the-cuff, bizarre claims. I've invited Joe to come in. This was planned out several weeks ago. Joe said he was going to definitely join us. This was last week. We had to postpone it for various reasons. He said he would join us today, and then this morning, pretty much, he backed out because he wanted to change the format to give himself 30 minutes of pretty much uninterrupted airtime to basically bloviate and run a presentation on Young Earth Creationism. And that was not what we agreed upon. That was not the topic of the discussion, or what we wanted to have as a kind of a free-flowing dialogue with Joe. Joe has actually debated Scientia here, which, by the way, I'm going to call him Ash from now on.
Thank you.
He's debated Ash about 4 times now, and literally got his ass handed to him every single time. And he still keeps coming back for more, but now that we've offered him a bigger forum, he's just kind of being gun shy. So we'll keep trying throughout the program here to get Joe in. I will keep definitely trying, but until then, we're just going to be talking about Joe's claims because he's put them out there in the ethosphere and the Twitter sphere. So we're going to talk about them. Anyways, welcome to the great debate community, guys. I know Ashley, you've been here a few times. James, you've been here once or twice too. So welcome.
Well, yeah, this is the first one here. I've been on
Side Strikes. Yeah, you were on Side Strikes. Oh, that's right. You haven't been in here before, have you? Oh, welcome.
I was having difficulty getting on, so I'm a pathetic old wretch that has difficulty getting used to some of the technology.
Hey, there's plenty of people out there that have that problem, and they have other people in their household sometimes to help them, as we've seen.
Well, I'm glad you guys figured it out at least. So Ash, so tell me your background with this guy Joe. Ash, I know it goes back a long time, and I'm vaguely aware of it, but go ahead and tell me the details.
It does, and I've engaged with him on Twitter for years. We've had 3 quote unquote debates. The first one was actually set up in a way which I modeled off of a debate that Kent Hovind had with oh geez, I'm so bad I'm forgetting your name, but and I remember Kent Hovind's. What's that?
Michael Shermer, maybe?
No, a woman.
Jeannie Scott.
No, not Gene Scott. But anyway, so getting to it, the debate format, and I'll look it up real quick here, was set up that it was like a 1-minute question at the most, and then a 3-minute response, and then a 1-minute rebuttal. And I think that worked really well. But at the very end of the debate, we had this kind of back and forth. We were just kind of talking, and that's what he agreed to from that point on until, as Steve just pointed out, that he changed it just now. And I can Karen Bartel. I'm sorry, that's the name. I could hear the typing. That's what it was. I picked it up from the typing. So it was Ken Hovind and Karen Bartel, and they had this really interesting back and forth, and it really frustrated Hovind that he couldn't do his Gish Gallop, because that's what he's expert at, and I think that's where Joe was just going. Joe was going to the Gish Gallop format of, hey, I'm going to have 30 minutes just to throw out as many things, a shotgun technique, throw out as many things as I can, and that's why I like our first debate, and then it was that format, and then afterwards he agreed to just do whatever, basically. Let's talk about one subject at a time and see where it goes, and that's what we did for debates number 2 and 3. And this one, I guess he just didn't want to come on air with other people. It's all I can think of.
You have to bring data.
Oh, that too. That other people, that it wouldn't just be me saying, hey, why are you even saying this? Where are you getting that from? Where'd you learn that?
It's kind of a combination. Looks like half of it literally seems like he's just absolutely parroting other people, and then some of it is unique to himself, of claims that I've never heard before from anybody, Young Earth Creationists or otherwise, and we'll get into some of those because they are quite funny. By the way, I do have Ash's link to his channel in the video description, so
very much.
Make sure you're going to subscribe to him.
And of course, you have to get a link out to James's website, because it is just fantastic, the amount of research that he's done. I mean, seriously, I haven't really been looking at it as much as I should. because
I encourage everybody to please download all the PDFs and read them at your leisure. That's what it's all there for.
and it's a clearinghouse. It is basically another source, just like Talk Origins. It really is. And
yeah, link. That's your tip thing, right, James?
Yeah.
Yeah, Trouble in Paradise. Link that to me, and I'll be happy to put it in the video description.
Yes.
Yeah, and then the latest thing that I've got off, which I had to do for a profit-making enterprise so that I can keep alive, is the Slam Dunk book. And that I'm gradually spreading word on that. Christina Janis very nicely reviewed it. And she's a paleontologist. She was actually changing some of her new mammal book based on information in my book. So as a non-paleontologist, that's kind of a feather in my cap. I'm pretty well researched.
Nice. Yeah, give me the link. I'll put it in there. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I do have special sponsorship. Brian Sapien from the Rational Response Club, Rational Response Squad, had kindly donated a little bit of fundage to my channel in exchange for some publicity, which I'm happy to do. This sponsorship is for the CelebrityAtheist.com and AtheismUnited.com. Both links are in my video description. I am on that page now for AtheismUnited.com. It is not just atheists, but it's atheists, agnostics, skeptics, humanists, anybody that wants to be involved to try to promote good science, rational thinking, cognitive thoughts, things of that nature, because people do know my stance is agnosticism, but I do side a lot with atheism because at the moment I think they have much better arguments. So be that as may. Which, by the way, which we're going to be doing because we're going over some of theist arguments. Joe's here right now, so we're going to show you why some of the arguments of Young Earth Creationism and theism are just horrible. So what do you guys want to start with? I think we got kind of talked about polystrate trees, which is something that we all been familiar with. But Joe loves his polystrate trees, doesn't he?
He does, and he's introduced it so many times, but I never think he really has an understanding of what it actually is and how it's supposed to support his case. I think that's just the place to start out with. He can never really give like a specific formation and tell anyone why he's even presenting it as a case for the Noachian flood, let alone actually say what the information is on polystrate to begin with. I don't think he really knows what the term actually means. It kind of comes down to those base points.
I've seen that before. He basically, when he was debating you, it basically just throws things out. Like he'll just say, polystrate trees, evidence. Okay, well, you keep kind of prodding him. Maybe not specifically for polystrate trees, but the principle's the same. You keep prodding him for evidence. Like, okay, well, what about that particular thing you just said gives evidence for the Noachian flood? And that's where his brain falls apart.
And I think the Socratic method is such a important tool to use against creationists, because once you start asking them questions, you quickly realize that the subject they're presenting is something that they only really know maybe the name of, and maybe a really quickly parroted concept from some creationist website.
Yeah,
but that's all they know. It's a total buzzword. There are two big
areas on the polystrate thing. The most obvious famous one that was circulating in the Henry Morris era were the ones in Yellowstone. And then there's the other one that you were discussing, which is that Newfoundland deposit. The name suddenly escapes me. I think it starts with a Jar Hill, something like that. And it's a rather different taphonomic relationship than the one that you see in Yellowstone, which is all pyroclastic flows. And pyroclastic flows are something that flood geologists should be really wary of bringing up, because it can't be fitted easily into a flood context.
And it always surprised me when Kent Hovind would bring up the Yellowstone Formation, because he would even say, look, these are a bunch of trees that have roots intact, and there's basically forests upon forests upon forests. And just that fact alone, and the fact that the trees are hundreds of years old, like totally discounts his claim that it had anything to do with the flood. Besides the fact that all of the flows, just like all the sediment, because it's not really sediment, just as you pointed out, are not in any way carried by water. They're volcanic layers.
And indeed, the one amazing thing about volcanic deposits, because of some of the silica things in there that can be so characteristic that you can identify specific volcanic eruptions from specific volcanoes, that they can work out in enormous detail. And that's what's always fun when you research the actual deposits. You find some really wonderful science in it. But Kent Hovind is a case where he's a Joe on a slightly more steroid level, because he scavenges the material a little more diligently. but he's still just scavenging it. He really doesn't understand what
You're
the
right.
hell he's putting together.
Yeah,
But I think there's two different types of things there. The ones of the polystrate ones at Yellowstone, as compared to other things, are actually a little bit different. Some of them do have volcanic pyroclastic flow that is laid down, but other ones are actually due to mud flows due to rivers, annual floodings. And again, they're not trees, as you know. We all know. We discovered they're lycopods, they're club moss. They're not what considered to be trees. But the Hovind, in order to sell that narrative, had to promote that idea. Oh, look, they look like trees, ergo they're trees and take a very long time to grow. Oh, look, these mud layers are actually sedimentation, or excuse me, rock layers, which they're not. And nobody challenged them on it back then.
Yeah, we know even from relatively recent cases of some of the Cascadia fault tsunamis that came through our Seattle area, that there are tree stumps still sticking up years, decades, centuries after the fact. The remnants of them have been sitting there. They don't erode away quickly. And that's in a world where the bacteria have figured out how to do, or fungi have figured out how to do lignin processing. And farther back, before that happened, you found that trees and things with that kind of superstructure weren't necessarily being degraded as quickly as they would in the modern context.
No, it's a perfect example. My brother and I went hiking often in Long Island in Willapa Bay, just north of Astoria. And all over the beach on Long Island, you can see what look like shaved off trunks and root systems. And it's because that was the subduction that happened. And we know when that happened, and we know when previous ones happened, so they can actually go out further into the water and find similar trees that are much older. And then again, radiometrically dating, and have a this consilience of disparate evidence. Basically, we have the one thing which is a historical record from in Japan, them saying that we had the tsunami occur in this year, and it matching the radiocarbon.
Oh yeah, that was one of the Cascadia.
And then the Cascadia fault zone, exactly. And that's the whole thing, is that I don't think Joe understands that either. Every time that I've talked with him, and polystrate trees is a perfect example, is that he just fixates on one point, which he doesn't seem to understand, of course. And then he doesn't understand that one point that he's fixating on is this huge collection of facts that support it in so many ways that he hasn't even introduced or even thought about. And this is a good example. It's what I call
the map of time problem. And no anti-evolutionist ever really thinks through map of time. And it doesn't matter whether they're young Earth creationist or intelligent design, old Earth creationist. There's no there for them.
Well, I mean, do you think it would make a difference to Joe if he actually learned that even young Earth creationists like Ian Juby doesn't call them trees, and he actually even said they're not trees? Would that even change Ian Juby's perspective if he learns that actual young creationists that are prevalent in the community don't agree that they're trees? So,
yeah,
I mean, who's he going to parrot though?
It's like that webpage from Answers in Genesis, arguments not to use. The creationists aren't on any one page. They're trying to compete with one another for profit.
Yes.
Because
in fact, one of those popped up just today, where Answers in Genesis was arguing one of the monkeys trope. Why are there still apes? That you shouldn't do this. And I reminded them, this is showing you how many creationists don't read Answers in Genesis. The fact that they continuously are repeating this on Twitter, they're not reading even Answers in Genesis.
And so that's the thing. There's no common front. They're just all kind of parroting something they've heard from someone else and not actually doing any research to find out, even if the Young Earth Creationist groups, the larger ones, say that's something that should be used because it's been so discounted for so many years.
Yeah,
no, I think go ahead.
In the source methods approach, that's why that's so critical to me, because to find out where people are getting their information from plugs them into what network they're operating from. That's why when people don't realize that a Kent Hovind is operating in a different frame than Answers in Genesis or Institute for Creation Research, and then beyond and underneath Kent Hovind, you've got Carl Baugh and these other little networks that flit around in these local creationist groups in Texas and others and do lectures and reports. And that's operating very far removed from the stuff that's happening up in Ken Hamland.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I think you're right, though, Ash. I think there's only so much pie to go around, right? I mean, you only have a certain amount of population that literally have been dumbed down to the point where they're accepting Young Earth creationism. And yes, I've said that I do believe that they are stupid people. I'm not going to lie about that. They really are.
The church-based groups, that's the whole thing, is that, it is basically them going out there and trying to sell their goods to the local churches.
Yep.
So that's what they're doing, is they're taking advantage of this, of, the active creationist church populations in their area, and that's why you always find them in certain rural areas. I mean, the one in Seattle, Discovery Institute, is a little bit different, but it's a similar thing.
A different frame, but you've also got there is a small body of creation scientists, and those are their stars, the Jeffrey Tompkins, the Andrew Snellings, and others that have real live geology and genetic degrees, and they're major star people. They're connecting up into a certain level in some of the same academic zones that you're encountering with intelligent design. I would have loved to have attended the University of Montana thing that Answers in Genesis just did earlier in the month, but I wasn't able to squeak over there. And unfortunately, nobody apparently in Montana among secularists was there to kind of monitor what was going on in there. It was very revealing to see what they were presenting.
Well, like the people like Tompkins and Snelling, I've talked to them. I have them on my email list. We have a chain letter that's been going back and forth with them for quite some time. They won't come on to any program where they don't have a Young Earth Creationist moderator. They don't want to have they don't have to answer questions they're not prepared to answer. Seriously, yeah, it is quite telling. It really is.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's true. You can find it in almost any ideological frame, but it's always sign of a weak position that you aren't able to defend your position intelligibly in front of people who you disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
So what was in some of the next topics that Joe had actually been saying? I'll say some of the bizarre stuff for a little while, unless you want to jump right into it, because
it's not all kind of bizarre.
I love bizarre.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you my favorite. I mean, I told you off air. I mean, you kind of organically got to the point where Joe has got so way out there in his claims. And I had mentioned this the other day, so a few people already know. But one of his claims was literally that all the chickens came from two roosters that were on the ark. So all of chicken kind came from two roosters that were on the ark. I have this in my Twitter feed. I have the actual Twitter tweet that he said this in.
It's possible he does not know that rooster refers to only a male chicken. I mean, maybe he doesn't have connection to farm animals or any knowledge of the universe.
How could you be that fundamental? Okay, I mean, that's pretty basic stuff, right? I mean, but Joe doesn't seem to be corrected on anything. I notice a lot of people correct Joe. Has Joe ever said, "Oh yeah, I was wrong on that," or just, "Oh yeah, I made a mistake"? Or I've never seen him do any kind of correction, or anything like that.
That kind of mea culpa. If you have a kind of a narcissistic mind where you can never be wrong, then you just shut down on that and move on to another little.
That's what he does.
Yeah,
that's
that
exactly
doesn't
what he
surprise
does.
me at all. I mean, even the Smittens of what I've seen him on the air, he can only present punchlines. He can't really get to a thread of argument. And if he wants to bring up chickens, well, fine and dandy. We can go into the genetics of Gallus and all the different genealogy data about where domesticated chickens came from, and then beyond that, birds and all the other stuff. And there's actually a creationist literature trying to work out how many bird kinds there are, which would be an interesting subject for a creationist to look at. But you ain't going to get that from Joe. He's nowhere near that stuff.
No,
I'm looking over his feed right now. What's that?
I brought up the whole chicken thing with him as well. As far as him also claiming that the egg, came after the chicken did, and that chickens. Anyway, we'll get into that later. But I brought up with him genetics and talking to him about chromosomes and how they actually give you a male or female, and he didn't understand that there's a difference between most birds and humans as far as that goes. And for him even to say that there were two roosters really shows you that he doesn't even understand genetics. And maybe he was thinking about the human genetics. With humans, okay, males give an X and a Y, right? So technically, we could possibly have males produce females. Because you have X and Y, or you have a double X. Well, guess what? Males can give a double X, but that doesn't work with birds. With chickens, it's the opposite way around.
Don't birds have they have three chromosomes, three sex?
No, it's not that.
But don't some of them have three sex chromosomes?
I'll have to look into that.
Or is that bees?
I have some buried in the data on it. One of the things he was talking about sexual reproduction in general, and I tossed a reference to a paper on from the Cold Spring Harbor Perspectives in Biology from 2014 on the origins of eukaryotic sexual reproduction, saying just in case he wanted to actually have some reading material to do about kind of where the science was about this sexual reproduction thing, and it long is before you get to things that have eggs.
Yeah, I remember birds have ZW rather than XY.
Exactly, ZW
right?
and ZZ.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The thing is, the males carry the double, and the females carry the different,
Right.
which is opposite in mammals.
That presumably is saying something about the genetic systems of dinosaurs, which is another delicious subject.
But again, it just goes to where he doesn't understand anything he's actually talking about. He just again throws out these these concepts and says, "Oh, this must be something that's going to disprove evolution." So I'm just going to say it over and over again, even though I don't even know what I'm talking about.
He does think that it actually. He literally thinks that he is falsifying evolution.
Oh, he's got a deluge. He's got a deluge of of data to prove the Noachian flood, but.
Where is it?
Comes up, does it? Yeah.
No, he never shows it. Never once. I mean, I've asked him for it. I'm looking through all his timelines. I don't see any evidence for a global flood. I have his book right here. Hang on one sec. I have his book right here. Jesus Christ is God. It is seriously unreadable.
What's about evolution?
There's not much in evolution here. It's basically him just parroting things out of the Bible. Here, let me show my audience this travesty of written literature that he tried to pass off as a book. It's just oh my God. Let me look at this. It's everything other line is italicized.
What the heck? How did Sean McLean get in there? Was it a reincarnation?
Maybe he's in a new age too. But I mean, this is just unreadable. I couldn't do it. I tried to at least try to find something in here to say, okay, what are some Joe's claims? I couldn't even get through this. It's basically Jesus Christ is God. Jesus Christ is God. He is a God. He is a God. Father is God. Jesus had a God. It's like every one of these things is just all that is. That the whole book.
What would be really interesting if somebody has the kind of software to look into this, I would predict that huge swaths of this material he has cribbed and modified from other stuff.
Oh, I'm sure. I am sure he did. I'm sure he did.
You could probably do a whole thesis on the working out the ins and outs of Joe's parasitism.
Yeah,
Yep.
Joe is definitely not very literate. I don't think he even wrote 90% of that. I think he probably just threw it all together from other sources and underlined in bold and italicized.
At the beginning of our last two debates, and I'm gonna have to do this again because I was doing it on the fly last time. When he was talking about things, I was like, "Wow, he's kind of coherent in some way." And I started to type in like certain terms, and it is.
Found out why? Because he copied from somebody else.
Exactly. He's just parroting. He doesn't even understand what he's reading.
Source methods is really a beautiful thing on that because you can start identifying tropes. You can find out what things are popping around. That's why any person who brings up radiometric dating, boom, they're instantly labeling themselves as to they're coming from a Young Earth Creationist framework. No intelligent designer would pay a slightest attention to that. Mm-hmm. So those little buzzwords and phrases that pop up, polystrate was one that binged in my head because I know how that's played out in the older creationist apologetics. You don't see it quite so much in more recent apologetics. Each one of those can act like a little diagnostic red pin that you can put on the landscape. You're trying to figure out what the guy's head, even when he doesn't tell you.
Yes. And let's go right to the next one, because this one came up over and over again with Joe. He doesn't understand the difference between absolute and which is radiometric dating, and relative dating. And, this comes up over and over again with him parroting the rocks date the fossils and the fossils date the rocks. Which is just like, come on, why does anyone even say this anymore? Well, because that's what they've learned to repeat, to try to... Yeah.
It's a common trope, and he could have found that in a lot of places. It's a bit more common in a trope mode in the Cantovian style apologetics than you would find in Answers in Genesis.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I've noticed that as well. He loves that little trope, as you said, that the dates date the fossils date the rocks, and of course that's not how it's done. They don't even date the actual fossils most of the time. They date the layers above and below it, and sometimes they don't even date those layers. They date layers that are relative somewhere else.
I'd love to see a wrestling match between Joe and the ghost of Nicholas Steno over the nature of stratigraphy.
No, I think you're right though. He doesn't know the difference between relative and absolute dating. He doesn't know how radiometric dating works at all. He's stuck in that whole Hovind thing. Oh, look, we have to know this or that, and you have to assume that the constants are not changed, which by the way is true. But as we've been discussing on my Facebook page, for those who've been paying attention,
isochrons.
Yeah, hang on. The people that have been watching my Facebook page, Paulo Gio just had a video out, and he did a brilliant job explaining how the creationists want to have something called variable decay rates, which is kind of like accelerated decay rates, right? They want to explain a ton of radioactive energy in a small amount of time. And if they were actually right, it would have literally vaporized the crust of the Earth. And so Apollo G has a great video on it, and it's called the heat problem.
With the speed of light, affects all of that.
The speed of light will as well, because you change C, you start changing the fine structure constant, you start changing a lot of other constants. But the fact remains that if they are right, literally life would not exist. And this heat problem, nobody's been able to solve it yet. They just throw it out there. Oh, well, you know what? We'll figure it out eventually. I just read on IRC, just literally yesterday, that they said this is a problem. This is something they have not resolved yet. They're working on it. Okay, well, until then, you have nothing, because you're basically positing something that would destroy the planet, and you have no solution for it.
For the last 20 years on these issues is the squeaky sound of their goalposts being gradually moved from one untenable position to another.
I certainly don't think Joe's got the memo on that. And by the way, I hope Joe's watching this. I gave him the link to watch. I hope he's sitting in his little trailer, going, I wish I was in there because I can't defend myself. But, hey, we gave you every opportunity, Joe.
Taking work away from his fantastic work that he's working on intelligent design.
The new book he's coming out with.
Oh,
yeah. I had to grump at him. Excuse me, I wrote Slam Dunk in 9 effing months, so I think you could produce something of value if you wanted to and could.
By the way, if you guys haven't gone over and subscribed to Apologia yet, go do so. He's got some awesome videos. I mean, I really like his stuff. He's going to be bigger than me one of these days. I'm not that big, so it's not that hard. He's already almost surpassed me. Okay, so let's see. Let me check my live feed. I always check my live feed every so often to see if we got any questions or what they're saying. Jade is out there. This hangout's been going on for 26 minutes. Yeah, already, huh?
I'd love to be able to see the screen on that, because I like to follow along on that on Sci Strikes, but all I see is just whoever's talking.
I did look, because you mentioned that, and I got something from a Twitter name Caper Guy, and he gave the timestamp to a video, so I'm going to have to see if I can find it for video number 3 and see what he's talking about. So I'll do that in a second.
While you're doing that, do you want to talk about the other claim that he had? Because we kind of touched on it, but we didn't get too much into it. That he thinks that what was it, that chicken eggs came before ambiotic eggs?
Oh yeah. The whole thing that he said that the chicken came before the egg. And this came, I think, in debate number 3. They're starting to.
Boy, did he get the chronology wrong on that one?
Yeah, I mean, cladistically, how does that even work out?
I don't know, and I tried to explain to him first of all that chickens are domesticated animals by humans, so there's that part that we have to deal with after we deal with the fact that amniotic eggs came way before they were even birds.
Way before.
So I don't know where he even I do, because he actually gave a source, and it was a weird thing. I'll have to look it up again, and it's so bad that he throws out these things, and it's just like a quote mine, where you throw out something, and then you have to go look for it, and then you go, he's leaving out so much. And
well,
it's like a Scientific American article or something. So I'll see if I can find.
Fortunately, I'm actually measuring those numbers. Of the 2,000 some odd anti-evolutionists I track, 95% of them never cite a primary source of technical work.
Yeah,
and when they're only paying attention to about 10% of the relevant data stream.
Yeah, when they do the. I'm sorry, we have a little lag here. I think we're a little lag. Don't mean to be stepping on you there. Yeah, when they do, they only quote a very small portion of it, right? I mean, they don't understand the context of the article. 99% of the time, every time I've ever had anybody, Young Earth Creationist or Intelligent Design, quote me an article, they've gotten the whole gist of it wrong. Mm-hmm. Every time.
The vast majority of them are getting it from a quote mine. They literally don't. Not only do they not look up the original source, but they don't realize they should have looked up the source to find out what it actually said and not depend on a secondary source.
Yep.
The moment you have an ability to siphon secondary sources and confuse them with primary ones, whoop, you've just jumped off the gangplank.
I had that happen the other day, actually, and this is why I had a plasma physicist come on. A guy named C. Brown had actually thrown out something along the lines that he got from a creationist webpage, literally a little blurb, in only one sentence, something along the lines of, we've never seen heavier isotopes in spectral lines from stars. And that's not what the blurb actually said, and the blurb was referring to a very specific instance of a compact binary system that actually had hit each other. Two neutron stars collided with each other, and so they were talking about spectral lines in that particular case, not in general. And the I asked him for the citation. Of course, he didn't have it. I had to get it from a friend, Genoan Solo, who actually can get behind paywalls. He found it, and I read the whole damn thing, which was interesting, but it had nothing to do with what C. Brown was saying that, oh, we've never seen heavy elements in spectral lines. So they don't verify their sources.
Yeah, and you'll notice two things about. First of all, you're using a source methods approach. You're tracking down the primary source, and second, you learn things in that you didn't know before. You're not getting knowledge from the creationist. You're getting knowledge from the stuff you're doing as you fact check the creationist, and it's a wonderful synergy, and you find out the most amazing things that way.
So basically, the dumber they get, the smarter we get.
Yeah, actually, ironically, there was a case where Mike Riddle showed up in Answers in Genesis show in Spokane for the first time, and so he made the mistake of putting most of his PowerPoints up on his website, so I was able to see an awful lot of his material in advance. And one of the things that really piqued my curiosity was a thing on supposedly carbon dating of diamonds, and It turned out to track down to this paper that from Southron, I think the scientist was, and I contacted the scientist who wrote the paper, so he kindly gave me the copy of the paper, and I was comparing my analysis of it with him to make sure I had it all correct. And when I checked with Riddle, not to my surprise, Riddle acknowledged, A, he had never read the original paper, he had just copied it out of Andrew Snelling's thing, and so now he was at the mercy of Andrew Snelling, and I suspect Snelling may never have read the original, and or he was certainly suppressing his contents if he did it.
Yeah, I really wish one of them would come on here. The Andrew Snelling or Tompkins or any of those guys, they just won't.
Lyle
would be great too. Lyle I have at least, I can't say respect for, but at least Lyle, I think, actually recognizes there is no evidence for Young Earth Creationism. He basically, he'll try to come up with explanations like asynchronous time and stuff like that, but he isn't really out there going, hey, you know what, there's overwhelming evidence for Young Earth Creationism, look at, the stars, blah, blah, blah. He actually used the stars in his PhD thesis to how to use deep time. So I think he recognizes that everything looks old. He just says, you know what, I choose to believe that the universe was made young, but it looks old, which to me is nonsensical.
There are a few of them that they recognize that no, evolution is not a theory in crisis, and no, there really isn't any evidence for our young Earth creationism, but for theological reasons, it's right from the Word of God, it must be true, and so never mind what the actual facts are in front of me, there must be some reason that I'm just too stupid to realize what the truth is.
And they don't want
to, get a lot of that taught.
They do not want to contradict one another. They don't want to have that infighting.
No, at all.
You will never see any, one interviewing another or them being on a certain show because they're like on the 700 Club and places. That is
so true. In fact,
they never want to, say anything that's going to go against the person who's on the show. They just want to ask them questions, and they want to say, "Oh, how do you know this?" Or, "Wait a second, this other person that we just had on a week ago said something opposite you." They don't do that. They don't create
and the intelligent design movement plays that game on their own front. There are no instances ever of an intelligent design advocate criticizing young Earth creationist concepts, even though they're not young Earth creationists.
Yeah, and I literally talked to a guy named Dr. Todd Wood. He's a creationist who actually, he says that there's absolutely overwhelming evidence for evolution, but he chooses to be a young Earth creationist. And I had asked him, I said, do you agree with Tompkins on the home chromosome number 2 thing? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, but you come on air to talk about the whole chromosome number 2 thing. It's like, no, why would I want to do that?
Yeah, see, that's a very...
It's like, well, okay.
That's when the evidence finally crashes in birds. Todd Wood is an intriguing case because he's simultaneously a really careful kind of scholar, but he's got that non-negotiable thing. And what he reminds me of is Arthur Edward Waite, the guy that invented the modern occult tarot. He was an Englishman who was simultaneously a very careful historian and scholar, and yet he really wanted to believe in that occult tarot. And the two never quite matched up. And you get that same thing with Wood, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, I just don't know why they don't care about honesty and integrity and truth. I mean, they have to fit their narrative such that their conclusion isn't really a conclusion. They start with their belief. They start with the premise that young Earth creationism must be true, and though everything must be conformed around that. And if anything conflicts with that, that is obviously wrong and can be summarily dismissed. That's not how you do science.
But as I told Kent Hovind when I used to call up his show in the mid-2000s is, if I really wanted to make money and I didn't have any qualms about how I did it, I would easily become a young Earth creationist because I knew all the.
I'd be a flat earther, dude.
Anyway.
Flat earther's the money. That's the bank right there.
No, not back then.
Yeah, back then, true.
I said, I would become a young Earth creationist because I can make money off of people just like you're doing it right now by lying to them and selling them just all this bullshit. It's pure hucksterism. And that's what it basically comes down to, is they don't really care what they're saying as long as they can get someone else to believe them and build a cult of personality off of it and promote themselves. And that's what Joe tried to do, remember? Joe tried to set up
Yeah.
I'll differ with you on that. I think the vast majority of creationists, including Kent Hovind, seriously believing, I seen finally a screen here. Joe Cenkowski, I think.
Is that you, Steve?
No, Simon posted this. Who I offered to join us tonight, but Simon said he had to sleep.
No,
but this is awesome. Joe Cenkowski hard at work on his new book.
Yeah, poor Joe is a perpetual coming attraction.
And this is, I think you posted it. Yeah, you posted this one, Ash. Bravely. He's just
Bravely bold Sir Robin.
Look at all these Twitter feeds. Half of them are about Joe.
My mug up in.
Oh, watch this one. This is my favorite. Real quick. I'm not sorry to have a tangent, but this is awesome.
Like organism.
Can you guys hear it? You can't hear it, can you? He's saying asexual monkey-like organism. What is an asexual monkey-like organism?
Yeah,
I'm not making this up. That's what he's saying.
I
We
know.
should have a asexual monkey-like organism if evolution's true.
I don't think
Someone
anyone.
explain this to me.
One of the things that I always like probing some of the creationists, when once in a while people will post an image of like skulls from various hominids and the like, and the creationists will kind of grump at them. And I put up as a general question, both for the pro-science people and the anti-science one, how many of those can you recognize by sight? How many do you know what they are by their names? And if you don't, why do you think you can venture an opinion on this subject? Because you haven't studied it enough to know what the players are.
Yeah, and they don't. Let's see here. Got some live feed. Just checking out here. Asexually monkey-like organism. Donald Trump. No, Donald Trump is not an asexual monkey. But I mean, that's his claim, right? I mean,
monkey-like.
The interesting thing.
oh, hang on. Let's play it real quick. I can hear that.
Monkey-like organism. Monkey-like organism.
I heard that the first time, and I was like, "What the fuck is an asexual monkey-like organism?"
Yeah, there
Yes,
can't
because-
possibly be any sense of either one of those terms as a concrete concept in Joe's head. Otherwise, he couldn't plug them together.
But that they are in his head for some reason.
Yeah.
This is why I mock Joe.
It's
He
like
really.
banana-like. He could just as easily say a banana like aardvark, and it would be exactly the
He just
same.
throws words. The dude has 4,000 followers, for God's sake.
I know.
Somebody's buying his shit.
Well,
And half of them are people like us, so just okay.
I hope so.
They are.
Nobody ever lost a dime underestimating the intelligence of the American public, and that was in the 1920s, so it hasn't changed since.
You know, and here's another thing that he posted like 5 hours ago. Something can't come from nothing. And I just had somebody post this on my Facebook too. Somebody actually had posted, they said, well, Steve, how do you know something can't come from nothing? Or how do we know something can come from nothing? And I'm like, we don't even know nothing can exist. I've never seen nothing. We've never tested nothing. We know nothing about the properties of nothing.
That's the
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you could have. Yeah, I don't think you could have absolutely nothing and something come from that. I don't. But I can't say that with any kind of definitive thing because I don't know anything about nothing. I don't know what the properties of nothing are.
It also is one that I call the origins or bust argument, because what it does is the way they avoid all the stuff happening afterwards. When I'm looking at something like the origin of amniotic eggs or the reptile-mammal transition, I don't need to know where the beginning of the universe came from. But of course, remember, he's a young Earth creationist. He thinks it's only 6,000 years old and that the flood is only 4,500 years old. And why didn't the Egyptians notice? So his map of time is in every possible respect screwed up, where he has the chronology wrong and no data on it.
What were you saying, Ash?
No, it's the same thing. That he just really doesn't have a concept that there are different fields of science, that these different fields of science say different things, and that some of these fields of science that say completely different things match up with one another. And so if he's going to say one thing and then not back it up, which he never does. If he's not going to back it up on anything that we can go back and do a little bit of research, the primary research, and find out where he got that from. He still doesn't even understand the fact that what we're talking about is not just like one theory. We're talking about, a whole field of research based around a concept that is presented in maybe one paper or is presented in textbooks or who knows where else, that brings in all these different ideas and puts them together in a way that we can understand the world around us. And that's, why I put this on my Twitter feed, is that, in science, theories explain facts. We have all these facts. We know that, certain things happen. We know that if you expose certain whatevers to whatever else, a reaction occurs. We know that over time, there's this, a change in whatever we're talking about. And we take all those facts together, and then we actually construct it in a way to explain the world around us. And he doesn't understand that. He really is so focused on one little thing at a time that he cherry picks everything to banality. It doesn't even mean anything.
The scientific method is lost upon him.
Oh, yeah. No, that's the whole thing, is that, he doesn't even understand what the scientific method is. So he can't even, put together an idea of what he's trying to present to us. He just wants to say, look at this. And then he wants you to try to explain it to him, I guess. Because he sits there and patiently, hears this out. But then he can't actually respond to it.
Conceding your point. And since you're never going to do that, he's always going to be in trouble. So he has to figure out how to move to the next Rolodex card to find a way to get his trope onto the field.
Yeah,
but the idea
it's a gish gallop.
To be accounted for, it literally doesn't occur to him.
They know the trope. They know the trope: observation, experimentation, repeatability, but they do not know what it means. None of them. I've never had a single Young Earth Creationist ever explain to me what those three things actually mean. They'd never get it right. But anyways, real quick, Jason had just sent to me this on Twitter. He's like, consider Joe on physics. Love this. Joe Cenkowski on physics. Antimatter, hypothetical form of matter that is identical to physical matter, except its atoms are composed of anti-electrons. So wait, antimatter is hypothetical?
And what about antiprotons, and what about antineutrons? I mean, why does he just stop there?
I have no idea.
So what it probably popped up is that he is troped off of some brief description of antimatter, and they may have mentioned an anti-electron, and without really knowing kind of how
They're
atoms
called positrons. They're not hypothetical.
No, but I mean in the sense of mentioning an anti-electron is that I always liked Richard Feynman's description that a positron is just an electron that's going backwards through time.
Yeah, and a Feynman diagram actually, same thing with particle pair creation. One particle is going forward in time, was backwards, but it's within Planck's time. So it's not really doing time travel as people may think, but that's how he does his diagrams.
If Feynman and Joe ever met, it would probably end up with Feynman hitting him with his bongos.
So on this one, this is
what did he say?
According to Joe,
explained this. Explained what? I explained this. White dwarf happens. 1,000-year-old red dwarf, not your assumed billions, loses its energy.
I don't know how that. Yeah, a white dwarf is a star much like our sun that after billions of years it'll go to red giant. It'll actually swell up. It'll engulf all the planets up to basically Earth, and then it'll start contracting and eventually becomes what's a white dwarf. It's basically held up by what's called electron degenerative pressures.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and so that takes a long freaking time.
What's he even trying to say?
I don't know.
And he doesn't know either.
No, exactly. That's the point.
What else did he send me here? Atoms are the universe. You are seriously wrong and amazingly so. Atoms comprise all of the universe. I thought you were smarter. Yeah.
Hey, don't trust an atom. No, don't trust an atom.
I mean, does he not know that atoms are comprised of things, and even those things that the nucleons are comprised of other things like quarks?
Oh, come on, you can't even tell us.
Yeah, and let's
not even get into string theory.
Goes mine with the virtual particles.
I mean, this is the kind of nuttery that we've been dealing with, Joe, and especially Ash, for like 3 years now.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know how you do it, man.
I'm getting resurrected because of it, I guess.
Well, it's funny you mention that.
Tribulation.
Does he think? This is what bugs me the most. They relate bad science to salvational stuff, right? It's like if you don't believe this horribly wrong science, you're not going to heaven.
Which is why I have always brought up to him the fact that Young Earth Creationism started as a cult.
Yes,
Seventh-day
still
Adventist
is.
Cult. Yeah, well, it still is. But it started as the Seventh-day Adventist cult, and Mary White basically having this revelation that she was taken back in time by Jesus to see the 7-day creation event in real time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all based off of, and Joe doesn't understand that.
And by the way, I'm trying. They're trying. Hang on one sec. Hang on one sec. They're trying to correct me in the live feed, but I'm going to correct them. No, a neutron star is held up by neutron degenerate pressure.
Oh.
A white dwarf is held up by electron degenerate pressure. So trust me on that one.
Very good. But that's why you can see a white dwarf.
Yes.
So yeah.
Now, yeah. Once you get past that pressure, the electrons will actually collapse into the nucleus, and it'll combine with the protons. It'll basically and everything that's left is neutrons, so that's why you have a neutron star, and that's held up by neutron degenerate pressures. Yeah,
and of course, as we all know, a red dwarf is a British science fiction series of a few years back.
Which couldn't have been millions of years old, so ergo evolution's wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go.
There you go. I hope Joe's watching this. I really do. I mean, if not, eventually will. But I mean, come on, Joe. Your claims, you're so scientifically illiterate that you are ubiquitously across the board wrong on everything. So
you're becoming a poster child for dumb, Joe.
Yeah.
I thought that was already taken by someone else. What was his name?
Yeah, I know. It's sometimes a crowded field. Yeah.
It is. It can be.
It's like the Internet Cup, with the president of North Korea for a while. You had Gaddafi and a lot of these other ones. So it's a busy field.
Yeah, Venom Fang X is who I was thinking of. Of course, him and who was that? Eric Hovind and the other guy that was hiking around. Yeah, they kind of like gang together. So there's like these gangs of roving Young Earth Creationists around, and they're doing the same thing. As the Seventh-day Adventists, they're going around there having these little tent seminars and revivals and trying to get people to buy into their religion. Hey, you can have salvation if you believe in Young Earth Creationism.
Evangelical ministry. For them, the science is simply an adjunct to save people's souls, and that's for them. It's the most important thing in the world. The same attitude Philip Johnson has. He's not a Young Earth Creationist, but he was making such a big deal about it because for him, Darwinism and materialism were keeping people away from revival of Jesus Christ belief,
and that's why it has to be the wedge. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because we were just talking to Theodore Valentine and a lady named Deborah, who was in the cult of Hovind for quite some time. He actually was the one leading the charge for freehovind.com. Oh. And they both recognize that Hovind is a con man. I mean, they're adamantly against Hovind now. They're like, this guy is a scam artist. He used his money to buy cars and just waste money. He doesn't give a shit about people. And like Theodore's now trying to start his own ministry, but they still promote Young Earth Creationism. Mm. The penny hasn't dropped for them yet. That the scam artist, the scam cult leader, started a scam, and they're just following along with it still. They just changed the leader.
Once a Tortugan, always a Tortugan. They may change the objects of their desire. They may alter some of their dynamics, but the faulty that allowed them to believe it in the first place can easily map
it's still there.
A faulty way of thinking.
Yep, it's still there. Yeah, I've invited Theodore on. He won't join us. He's polite about it, but he doesn't. He says, I don't really know much about Young Earth Creationism except that I believe it. If you want to talk about Young Earth Creationism, get a hold of Dr. Troy Lawrence. And I'm like, we already have. Dr. Troy Lawrence said he was going to come on and give us evidence that human chromosome number 2 fusion wasn't a fusion. He came on and didn't know anything about it, and even admitted he just read about it like a couple days prior. So yeah, this is what we're dealing with.
Interesting arguments from authority.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's
and it wouldn't have occurred to them that they would need to kind of read some of the original material. Like this stuff is kept in a vault somewhere. Excuse me, the original papers you can actually get online. So there's
I try to point that out all the time. Yeah, that's the weirdest thing about this. It is really a type of Ludditism, where they just do not want to accept the fact that there are such things as libraries even. They can't accept that. They can't accept.
Oh, and I know
actually this treasure trove of data out there that anyone can access, and we can give them a way to access that information. But they
even relatively
they just can't accept it.
As late as maybe 2004 or 5, it was hard to find an awful lot of primary sources free online. But that's not the case now.
No, but even 2004 and 5,
academia and professors' websites, I can get at least 80% of the primary sources, and often full books and obscure older material where I can see the original stuff myself. I don't have to take somebody else's word for it. And so when you look
at all the time as well, I used to point that out all the time, like in the late 90s and early 2000s, is I would go, look, I got this paper off the microfiche at the local library, or I went in and I used, EBSCO or ProQuest at my college. And you can go in there too, because guess what? The library is open to anyone in the public, to see this. And I used to point that out all the time. And it's been going on for so long now that there is this real drive towards anti-intellectualism, to basically being ignorant on purpose.
Well, the whole fake news trope, there's nothing
Yes.
more pernicious than that one. That is really dangerous to the Republic.
Yeah, back in our day, we actually had to go to the library. I mean, kids today don't even know what the hell that is, right?
Well, there are some places, I've several times encountered stuff. Our Eastern Washington University Library happened to have, by some unbelievable coincidence, they had actually had some obscure journals that I encountered in some creationist citations. One of them was a little geology journal, and that's why I found out that this paper that had been cited by Woodmarap and Ord, they were misrepresenting the contents. And the little journal is not available online. There's no way you could document it unless you actually physically saw the thing, and EWU had it.
Can you
And
see
then
my
another
screen?
one.
Can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
This is funny because he'll say things like atheists never say what evolution is, but what it isn't. And yet, we've explained to Joe countless times, we look at Joe. Here's the definition of biological evolution, right? A change of allelic frequency or heritable traits from one population of species from one generation to the next generation over time. Simple as that, right? Just something very simple. We do explain to him what biological evolution is, but it doesn't stick with him. It just does not. He doesn't get it.
Same thing over and over again. Yeah, there's nothing stinking in. Oh, Joseph Morrow, there's another one who's a real live wire.
This is his. Is this his? This is my feed, isn't it? No, this is his feed. I don't remember. Yeah.
Oh, and Dinesh D'Souza. I follow Dinesh D'Souza too, and I'll carp at him. He's popped into the anti-evolution biz just occasionally, but he's mainly on my scope because he's part of that Coulter Camp network that Ann Coulter belongs to, that intersects with anti-evolutionism and anti-scientism and really bad history.
Joe the other day, Joe this day was like, he said, I was pretty, this is like 2 hours ago, just before we went on air. He said, I was pretty clear that the format would be different. It's not my fault that Scientia Perceptum didn't read this. I had a different preparation. We did read it. Ash ddid read it. We rejected his proposal and said, no, you're not getting 30 minutes to bloviate and gish gallop and shotgun. That's not what we want on my channel. Yeah, and I said, well, you run away. And if sure as shit, he ran away, and we knew he would. It's like, wait a minute, so you don't get 30 minutes of uninterrupted time for you to say whatever you want. That's not why we have discussions on my channel. We have discussions to you give us the claim, we'll address it, and explain to you why it's wrong.
And he never presents that before. As I pointed out with sending some older tweets. When we first set up this, the fourth debate, which took him 6 months to even set it up, and 3 more months to actually agree to do it on this week. But yeah, he never presented that format before, and it's it's kind of telling though that he wanted to basically press this, that I want to do this now. Of course he did, because then he would never have to actually present anything. He would do what he did in the third debate. So at the beginning of the third debate, he had about 10 minutes to basically do a presentation to get an introduction in, and I just let him go. And I wrote down things, and I told him this when he was interrupting me.
Promissory note. I watched that thing. It was a long presentation of what he was gonna tell you.
Yes, what he was going to tell you, but he never said what he was going to say. I'm going to say this. He never really
and then
said
you never got around to telling you. You could never. That was one of the ones with the
that was going to be the deluge of evidence.
I love that. It's kind of like here's the index to everything that I'm going to tell you. All the the index goes to this, and then when you go to look at find where it points to, there's nothing there. There's no book.
It's like a 30-minute movie trailer with no actual film attached.
And then when it came my turn to start going point by point about what he introduced, which was kind of actually my whole reason for letting him go first. Hey, spew all your stuff, and then I'm going to go after each of your points, because if I introduce anything, he's not going to be able to answer any of it, so it doesn't matter. So anyway, do it that way, and then he wanted to interrupt me over and over and over again. Yeah,
if you guys have not watched the debates, go to his channel real quick and watch it. Seriously, they're just epic. By the way, Ash, you people do know you. Most people do, but some people don't. I don't think. Can you just real quickly just give your CV just for a second? Sure. You don't have to too much detail, but I mean.
Yeah, no. I started out as a cultural anthropology major. My focus was comparative religion, and I was looking in psychology as well, along with that. So that's how I started out college. After getting out of the military, I was in the Coast Guard for a tour, as they say, during the Gulf War. After a little while, I realized that was just kind of like what I did as a hobby, because growing up, my parents were atheists. They were just here. That's why I had to push the debate back a week. They joined me out here from the West Coast for a week, and they grew up as atheists, and I had religious texts on my bookshelf from all religions. Used to read them. Used to love just looking into them and doing more research on them. So that's why I thought comparative religion would be interesting. I was interested in human evolution anyway, so that was kind of cultural evolution. And halfway through, I realized that there were so many people in my classes who just wanted to argue about how Christianity was better. It was a smaller school. And so they weren't really into comparative religion. They're more about proselytizing their religion in the class. So I switched to pure evolutionary biology, and that's what I graduated with. And I've been teaching for the last 11 years now, just middle school science. So that's kind of.
So you have a little bit of background in science. So when Joe is presenting what minimal claims he does, I mean, you're literally just swatting them like they're nothing. I mean, I watched you.
Yeah,
it was brilliant.
And the other part of that is that after I got halfway through my basically the upper level science courses I need to take to get my bachelor's of science, I started to look into the creationism again, because it's just been an interest of mine for a long time. I've been in contact with Ken Hovind for a long time, and some other people when I was growing up in the Seattle and Portland area. And so I found out that one of my teachers at the college I was going to actually used to debate Duane Gish, on a yearly basis. And so I found some of those old tapes at our school library's archive, and I watched those, and I took a class with him for a year, and he basically recommended that I pursue a dual degree in philosophy of science, where I was going to be studying the history of creationism, because that's what I talked about with him a lot, was just, what is the history behind this concept, of creationism in the United States. So I really learned a lot about creationism. Growing up near Mount St. Helens, there were a couple of creationist museums, real small, just out of people's houses, basically, in those areas.
Oh, you're right in my neck of the woods. You're not that far from me. I'm in Spokane.
Oh, I was. No, I was.
I was in Bremerton.
And yeah, exactly. So I grew up in that area. Now I'm in New England, so kind of far away from home. But anyway, I've got this huge background in this concept, as well as people who really influenced me, especially in college, and then local people. I used to go by those creation museums, the St. Helens one especially, and just talk with the people there for a long time, and kind of just learn about where they were coming from and what they were trying to do, and that's where I really got the concept that it's really about making money so that you can save souls. It is for them. Most of these people, when they start these creationism museums, or even just private citizens who are espousing creationism, a lot of it is all about, I want to make sure that other people go to heaven because they've been taught that that's what they're supposed to do.
That's where I throw the bullshit flag, right? I mean, look, I get there's Christians out there that want to save people's souls. Blackjack Reviews here. He has a PhD in comparative religions. He's an Eastern Orthodox, somewhere in that ballpark. And I get that people care about wanting to save souls, but when you have to throw in absolute bullshit to do it, I can't imagine God using that as a vehicle to get you saved. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you have to believe stuff that's demonstrably false? There's no way I could ever believe Young Earth Creationism for all practical purposes. Again, providing me enough evidence, I'll change my mind on anything. But let's be realistic here. I mean, it would have to be so ungodly monumental to the point of just being unfeasible, I think, at this point, obviously. So why would God use something like Young Earth Creationism to try to save souls? It makes no sense to me.
It becomes a cult of personality. It really does. It becomes these people want to keep preaching because they gain more followers, and those followers help them out, and they feel really special because of that. I mean,
I agree with that. Yes, it is a cult mentality. I definitely agree with that.
And
but I'm
Joe
looking at
church.
But I'm looking at the existential kind of things. If the God really does exist, why is he using Young Earth Creationism when I can demonstrably disprove Young Earth Creationism? Ergo, am I disproving that God? Yeah, I think so.
From their perspective, you haven't done that at all. That what you have is the divide between
which is scary.
The divide between the literalist mind and the metaphorist mind. Whenever you have a religious dogma that carries with it baggage about stuff that isn't true, flood and all this stuff they picked up from the Babylonians, You either have to look at it as a metaphor, and therefore you can accept all the modern scientific interpretation, but then you have to decide where you get off the metaphor bus and how much of the religion is left. The literalist has a safe harbor to go to. They can take all of that text pure. They don't have to worry about having the flood being real. It must have been real. And once you get into that inerrantist logic frame, everything that conflicts with it must be false. And now their mind operates like a fascinating rationalization mechanism to generate information that they can pick apart and assemble in a new way to refute the thing they do not want to be true. So when you read through the kind of apologetics you get on flood geology, it's fascinating and in gymnastics, but I don't for a moment think that they're doing it out of any recognition that what they're saying is wrong. They're convinced that it's true.
Depends on the person. So I've seen it go either way. I think the people in the upper echelons, the Tompkins, the Snellings, those guys, I think they do know what's wrong. I at least I like to believe that, because if not, then they are the most dishonest people of all time.
No, they're Tortugans. You have to reflect, how do people believe things that are not true? Once you have an ability to not think about things you don't want to think about. The two poster child that I use in this area are Philip Johnson and Richard Milton. You may know of Philip Johnson. You may not know about Richard Milton, because Milton's a relatively minor player on the scene. Both of them are extremely bright.
Is Milton? Oh, what's his book?
Strider. Yeah.
What's that?
Who is he's functionally a young Earth creationist, but he's not religious.
Yep.
I've never seen anything of the sort.
And
That makes no
I
sense.
couldn't imagine that could be possible.
I don't
when
either.
you look
Shattering Mrs.
what's his
Darwin.
argument, you realize he has done exactly what all the other creationists do. He swallows material secondarily. He's my monument to scholarly incompetence. He's a poster child of people copying arguments they've never bothered to fact check.
Well, that's just when you're so incompetent, you have to rely on other people, and you're just parroting what they're saying. That's all that is.
But the best thing about Richard Milton, I actually like his book. I like his Shattering the Myths of Darwinism book, because it is basically what you were doing, James. It's basically a collection of these outdated, refuted creationist prats. That's all it is.
And except he doesn't realize they're creationist prats. No. He's actually swallowing them. There's a perfectly fine example. And in fact, did you read his other book, the one that he'd written in between? He wrote the anti-evolution book and then remarketed it in America under a different title. And there was
I only have that one.
Forbidden Science, I think it's called. Oh, that one was really revealing. There's an entire chapter of Forbidden Science, which is a crib of an entire chapter of Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions, right down to the obscure German texts that Kuhn had translated from the German and that Milton was copying as though he had done the translations himself. This was exactly the same kind of parasitism that he was doing in his anti-evolution book, except it was really blatant. And so the guy easily copies stuff, and then he believes it's true now because he has copied it and he believes the parts he wants to believe.
Okay, and I get that, but why is it that we have people in our own community that don't have a monetary gain, they don't have any reason to accept Young Earth creationism, but they do so, and then they say it's not a salvation issue. Like, yeah, you know what? It doesn't matter whether you believe the Earth is flat or not. It doesn't matter if you believe the Earth is young or not. Those are non-essentials. Those are non-salvatory issues. So to them, it doesn't matter whether that affects their salvation or not, even though you have Kent Hovind saying that it does affect your salvation. But why, when they look at the science, the only thing I can think of is that they really don't understand basic shit. And because of that, they want to fit into this community that is so far removed from norm. They're literally 3 or 4 standard deviations of what you consider to be normal. The scientists that do this quote unquote research or work in the Young Earth Creationist movement are seriously, they're 99.7% away from what you would normally find, and that's 3 standard deviations. So it's not like they're the majority by any means. And so why do people in our community have to keep saying things like they believe Young Earth creationism, even though all they have to do is look at the science and realize that it's complete bullshit?
Well, but you've just answered your own question. How would they go about looking at that? I've isolated 4 main areas about people who believe things that aren't true. Demographically, they're addicted to secondary sources that they don't fact check. That's the first core.
Agreed.
The second one are the very narrow set that actually are the fact claimants. There are very few of those, and they pay attention to very little of the data. I'm literally measuring it in that TIP project. There are 36 people on planet Earth who make fact claims in the anti-evolution movement, and they only are paying attention to about 10% of the data stream. And then the third is...
Yeah, one sec. Go ahead. Continue. Yeah, we can hear you, Black. One sec. Go ahead, James.
Okay, and then the next, those first two are scholarly problems that are congenital to the way the mindset works. The third one is the fact that they don't work out a map of time. In their own heads, they don't really think through what they think happened. I found people who believe the flood happened, but yet they don't really think about when it happened or what happened. They have a very generalized, vague idea, and their mind is really okay with that. And Joe is an extreme case of that. He hasn't really thought any of this through. He imagines that he does. That gets us to the fourth really fundamental bit. Never do they conceptualize evidence that would cause them to change their mind.
No,
They
that's
literally
Morton's demon.
cannot do that.
Yeah.
And so it's just as true. But the litmus test for me are transitional forms. That independent of whether they're intelligent design or young Earth creationists, they'll tell you why they don't accept fossil X, Y, or Z. But you try to get them to explain what the fossil would need to look like to change their mind, boop, they've never thought about it. And that's true of all anti-evolutionists from the get-go on. I know of literally no counterexample since St. George Mavard in the 1870s.
No, I agree with you. I've asked people, okay, what would we expect to see if you're right? They hate that question. What model would we go by? They don't understand transitional forms. They don't understand that all species are transitional forms. They don't understand it's not some kind of linear change or morphology. When you try to explain it to them, they're like does in a headlight, right? They're just basically going, what?
Brain is going to shut down.
Shuts it down. Yeah, it's called Morton's demon. Information only. Well, they only have information that it's a support that they're allowed in. Any information that's conflicting with what they think they know is automatically rejected. It doesn't even evaluate it.
The way that I present this argument is that I actually asked them to tell me what was the kind and what were the species that we now have today that were related to that one kind. So basically, give me a list of species that exist now that were related to one kind that got off the ark. And they can't do that. And the reason they can't do that is because they realize right away that they, first of all, are confusing fossilized evidence with extant species. And the next thing that happens is they can't even understand the idea that once they do accept that they can give me some kind of answer to that question, it automatically negates the fact that they are saying that evolution doesn't happen, because the rate of evolution, of course, and this comes up all the time, the rate of evolution that they're going to say occurs is much quicker than the rate of evolution that's accepted by anyone, anywhere. I mean,
some realize that. Yeah, some of them actually realize that. Oh, look, we have to have speciation, or else the creationist model doesn't work. Those are the ones like Sarfati and the creation.com.
But still, going back to that premise right there, is that they can't even give the kind, the pair,
right? But they at least recognize that you have speciation. I have younger creationists out there. They're like, oh, no species have ever changed in any other species. Well, that goes against the creationist model.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're right.
Again, this is a speciation issue. So one of the things that I'm studying is one of my hot button items in the TIP project. One thing that's very important to realize is that intelligent designers don't bother about this problem. And the reason is because they don't have to book the stall plan on Noah's Ark. And because they don't need to do that, they literally don't think about it. The only ones who do have to sort of think about how many kinds there were are young Earth creationists who have to figure out how many kinds there were on the Ark and how to get the modern species from them.
But they can never do that.
Well, the baraminologists...
They've tried, and
it's an...
Yeah, they are trying. Right.
Leitner has listed off the number of bird kinds. I think it's 186. She leaves out all fossil data, and she manages to produce a single finch group that has 1,200 species in it, which she doesn't realize that she has just said that 1,200 species of finch have emerged since just 4,500 years ago.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The baraminologists, at least, I think that they're trying to do something, but they're failing miserably. They are taking a scientific approach. Believe it or not, I will go on a limb. I've looked into this. I think they are trying to take a scientific approach, but because they are taking a scientific approach, they're failing. It's so hard, and they don't know what to do.
You know the term monobaramin?
Self-refuting, yeah. A baramin?
You know the term monobaramin?
Yes.
Yeah, that one is the really cutie. That's the time bomb. Because a monobaramin is a subset of a kind that's basically a natural branching evolutionary lineage within a kind.
Yeah, they love to
One
have
of
the
the
little slice
monobaramins.
section. Yeah.
One of the monobaramins that Wood and company have conceded for a decade is the horse sequence. The entire horse
All
is
ungulates.
a monobaramin. And yet you've got Ken Ham to this day
Pterodactyls, yeah.
insisting there's something wrong with the horse sequence, in the same breath that his own creation museum is extolling the baraminologists, who he doesn't know have actually conceded the very point that he's denying, because none of them ever compare notes.
Well, they get the you know, there was a long time ago, Hovind had actually, I think it was Hovind, had said, oh, there was some display of ungulates in some museum that had gotten something wrong about the 3-toe and 4-toe, and whatever. The museum shut down for a day to check into it, or shut the exhibit down for a day. They found no, they weren't wrong. They put it back up, and that actually translated to, oh, creationists get, you know, these things about horses shut down, and, you know, they're still using this to this day, even though it was refuted, you know, decades ago. They'll be like, oh, look at these evolutionists. They're using these evolutionary things about horses that we showed decades ago was wrong, and we got a display shut down because of it. That's how they twist things.
Shut down.
Well, because they're all operating from too far away from the data stream. My favorite one in the horse lineage is Dinohippus, because that's the genus in which the side toe is finally disappearing. And there's actually a species in the Dinohippus genus that still retains those vestigial side toes, where its other members of the genus have actually dropped them. So we're talking about a very microevolutionary flip in some basic developmental genes, which then the whole has been investigated in quite a lot of detail, and which anti-evolutionists pay zero attention to.
Yeah, and same thing. It's like when I looked in like the elephant kind. There was like 30 some odd different types of elephants they would have to account for in very, very rapid hyperevolution. When these, excuse me, had a sneeze. These elephants, they have a gestation period about 2 years, and you would have to get like all these different types of pachyderms in a period of a couple thousand years. It's not possible. It's completely 100% impossible. You'd have to have a speciation event every generation. And even then, you wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, you'd have to have blindingly fast speciation, which ironically, another thing about anti-evolutionary notions about speciation is that everybody in the field is so bloody vague that the average grassroots Joe level creationist has no clue what they're talking about. So they think speciation means dog turning into cat, not something cat-like turning into something very similar that can still temporarily breed with each other until the zygotic isolation mechanisms kick in.
It's still called a cat. I mean, until it becomes a paraphyletic clade.
Say, oh, well, it can't be anything but a cat. What they literally can never do, even the ones who concede speciation, like Michael Denton or Michael Behe, is they never apply it to actual fossil data to see how many of the blips in the fossil record can be accounted for by the speciation process they supposedly concede. And that goes right back to their map of time problem, that they never think any of that through. They don't realize there's a data set they need to deal with.
Let's get Blackjack in here. Yeah, let's get Blackjack in here real quick. Your mic working, Blackjack?
I love the icon.
Oh, thank you. It's actually a custom avatar.
I was going to say, as a hexapodal vertebrate, there are no vertebrates that have a wing appendage like that. It's very evolutionary, that is difficult to account for.
Oh, but if you pay attention, it's attached wing. He's not born with it.
Oh, well, then that's okay.
Yeah, it's artificial.
Yeah, artificial. Steampunk.
Steampunk. Steampunk's cool. Blackjack's. You know, his specialty is, you know, comparative religions, things like that. I mean, he is pretty knowledgeable at Young Earth Creationism. So let's bring him to the conversation. Anybody else who wants to join, the link is going to be out there. If you want to come on in, I'll give it to you. I probably will keep this open until 8 o'clock my time, and then I've got to run, unless it's like really popular, and then I'll just turn over something.
Sci Strike hits at 9 o'clock. I'm going to be there for that too.
Oh yeah, don't forget, Sci Strike does his debunkings on Fridays. He does like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing.
Yeah, you're telling me about that. I want to listen to that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah.
Well, now, there's one thing I wanted to bring up, because you guys are very scientific, and I'm not nowhere near as versed as you guys are in the actual workings of the Young Earth Creationists and evolution. But you made a comment before about why do these people who are Young Earth Creationists believe it's right very, very strongly, and yet say, "Oh, it's not worry about your salvation," things like that, who continue looking at the data yet stay Young Earth creationists. I would say it really comes down to the state of religion as a whole, which is peer pressure. Their entire lives are so wrapped up in all this, their friends, their work, their ability to work and things are so wrapped up within their faith that I'm not saying that they don't believe it, but they set up mental barriers to where they aren't willing to sacrifice those social structures and those core beliefs for, well, let's be frankly, the truth. But they are honest enough with themselves in that they're not going to try and force it onto other people. So, I mean, it comes down to a little bit, when you get into that, it's a little bit less psychological, less scientific and more psychological, as I think, I don't know your name,
Scientia.
Scientia. But like I said, it's something that I think to discuss that, you'd have to get away from the science and get more, the science of evolution and more on the science of psychology.
Sure.
Yeah,
no, I actually totally agree. Because
that would be true of any dominant structure.
Hang on, James. Let Ash go. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ash.
no, I totally agree. And it goes into the whole cohort. You want to be part of the group that you are growing up with, that all hold similar beliefs as you. And there's that need to want to be like everyone else. And there are some outsiders, of course, that come along as well. But the whole point of this is that, people can, want to be part of that group, especially in their own culture. But once you are starting to get into the society, especially that we have now, you really have to wonder how much that psychological pressure felt to be part of the group is really kind of peer pressure and bullying. And this is the whole idea where, when you get into certain types of religion, it really becomes like this abusive relationship where you don't have the right to question anything that goes on, and then you end up like, and I hate to bring this up just because it happened recently, the anniversary happened, but the Jonestown situation, you're going to drink the Kool-Aid, whether you want to or not, because you have either been or are chosen to be part of this group, and they just don't understand, the whole implication that they've based their lives off of. How do we get them out of that? That's a great question. And you're right. There's a lot of psychology involved.
It's slow process. It's a multifaceted way to get people out of Young Earth creationism. We try to do it from the science point of view, and then you have other people like Wayne Fillmore and General Han Solo that do it from the biblical. And, I can't argue the biblical points because I don't know who's right. I don't take the concordance approach, but I don't care who's right. If the ends justify the means, if somebody gets out of Young Earth creationism, I don't care if they switch to, old Earth creationism or theistic evolution or whatever. It's a fact of remains is they're at least having better science.
Right.
What their faith is makes no difference to me.
There are some factors here that are independent even of the coercion issue, and one of the analogies that's rather important has to do with studies of the psychology of how people rank things in group versus out group in politics.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
There was a recent study where various positions were labeled Republican and Democrat, and you would discover that most people will tend to like them if they're of the same party or not. But if you switch the labels around, their positions will actually switch. That same a liberal will start disliking something if it's labeled as being Republican, and vice versa. And it's independent of the content.
They haven't actually read what the bill is about. Yeah.
Right.
They just want to be part of that group because that's their identification.
In religious contexts, that you have a set of dogmas and you have a set of social connections. The diagnostic with creationism has to do with what I describe as the culture camp, the culture war mentality. And that's the dominant structure that it's very difficult, rare to find an anti-evolutionist who is not a culture camp conservative religionist. None of those things are individually diagnostic. It's the connection of them that make the strong dynamic. And it therefore is not just a notion about how old the earth is or whether Darwinism is true, but whether gender roles in society and political left versus right, and there's a whole mass of network. And when you have a whole worldview built on that, you've literally been raised in it, it's not easy to disconnect yourself from that stuff because it's all part of a big package conception.
And you know this pretty well growing up in Mormon country where you're at. especially in eastern Washington, the lower, near Idaho, there's a lot of that out there, and it's really hard to get out of it. And
I was
even growing
lucky.
up, I
I
had
was
some
raised
friends.
in a non-religious household, so it was never a matter with me.
Yeah, but I was going to say I had some friends who grew up in that. They moved farther to the west, and that's why I knew them. But they grew up in that area, and it's
Southern
such
Idaho is
peer
very
pressure.
Mormon. It's basically a
Yes.
satellite. It's got a rival. My Baptist niece was always fascinated to see how big the Mormon temples were when we were traveling
Yes.
through that area, because they were kind of
And
making a
that's
rival.
Yeah, and that's that cult of
The one
personality
in,
again. You
Salt
want to
Lake.
be part of that, don't you? It's look at that huge church. It's so spectacular. I want to see what's inside of it. Well, guess what? You can only see inside of it if you become part of the religion. It's the same. It's the same thing with a lot of creationism. Is that you can only really know, and this kind of goes into the religious speak. You can only really know and understand and be accepted if you can kind of repeat what they've been telling you to say, and then you're part of the in group.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I love Mormon. I'll say, of all the fringe Christian groups, I actually like Mormons the best.
I do too. You guys know that I'm Mormon, so I mean,
a bunch of them in the family. There are some sweet Jehovah's Witnesses that I know. They're just some wonderful ones. On an individual basis, they can be the salt of the earth, independent of their content.
yeah. I mean, I recognize there's a lot of issues with the Mormon Church. I mean, both scientifically, archaeologically, Egyptology. I mean, there's a lot of issues. And there's no question about that. But as far as the people, I think the people are wonderful. There's nothing cult-like I see with Mormonism at all. They are wonderful people I've known for a very, very long time. This mythos that their cult is just ridiculous, unless you call any kind of religious organization cult, which would fit because cult does mean formal venerable worship. But no, Mormons are they're awesome people. I mean, George and Olive Osmond, who's the patriarch of the Osmond family,
Yes.
and they were the nicest couple I've ever known. Very, very nice.
No, and that's the whole thing.
They're great people.
I like them as people. You're right. It's just that some of their beliefs are really weird, and then you've got to kind of get around that. And then you talk about them, talk about these beliefs with them, and a lot of them are kind of like, that is kind of weird, or I see where you're coming from.
You're getting that Tortugan mindset where they don't think about things they don't think about. I've talked both with still practicing Mormons, because I'm connected with the Spokane Faith and Values group, where I'm their Ask an Atheist blogger, and there's Mormons in that group, and I've also talked with a lot of ex-Mormons that belong to our various secular groups, and when I've asked them about, didn't you spot the parts of the Book of Mormon that have historical anachronisms in them? And they literally have not thought about it. None of their preaching mentions it. It's not really discussed any time in their frame. And they don't really talk about it until they get out of the church.
Yeah, they're talked about. No, that's not true. I mean, there's a whole books on journal discourses and everything. They do talk about certain things. I don't think Mormons try to hide anything. I mean, if you look at the journal of discourses, there's a lot in there that they have, and then some of it's, like I said, it is questionable, but. No, I don't think they try to secretly go, okay, we don't want anybody finding out about the kind of stuff. That's just not true.
It approaches problems in the same way that Eric von Daniken approaches problems with ancient astronaut lore.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
Very cagey about what it is. The fact that discourses, there, all of the major scholarly journals in the Mormon subculture are now available online, so everybody can read this stuff.
Yeah, they're not very scholarly.
Find out well, from their standpoint, they are.
They're not, though. No,
but
they're
definitely
not.
As scholarly as they can get.
But again, this
anyway,
is another area that's ripe for creationism. You could easily have a subset of creationism that comes off of Mormonism.
Mormons demographically are young Earth creationists in about the same proportion as the American population. It's not a doctrine of the church, though. The church kind of stays out of that issue. But Melvin Cook was a major one in the 1960s and 70s creationism, and he was a Mormon. So demographically, they're just as likely to be a young Earth creationist in the Mormon faith, but there's no doctrinal reinforcement of it the way you get in, say, Southern Baptist.
Correct.
Yes. That's kind of where I was going with this, is that within the Mormons, a lot of them are young Earth creationists, but you'll very rarely find these hardline young Earth creationists. And that's because, and I'm going to compliment them. While I still disagree with them, they're raised as an idea of don't be fake in the way you treat people.
Correct.
Be nice.
They want to learn about people. that's the whole point of the mission, right? They want to go
Yeah.
and they want to learn about people and they want to.
Yeah, they're very respectful about that. Yeah,
I agree.
They have a huge sense of humor.
but that's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just, because there's something I was actually going to go to, whereas you get people like Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's a reason I'm saying that's because Mormons, when you leave the Mormon faith, your family still talks to you. You still have that social connection. They may look at you a little differently, but there's no true disconnect. If you really need help, they'll be there. But then you have people like Jehovah's Witnesses and a lot of Baptists that if you ever leave this thing, you are dead to them. You are cut off. You are going to hell. And that's where you find this Young Earth Creationist, believe like we are, or you're doomed to hell. And personally, I hate to say it, when I find those hardline Young Earth Creationists, it's almost at a level of abuse of others, that they are raised in a very abusive mindset themselves, which turns them to be very abusive in turn. And you find that in the most stringent believe like us or go to hell. Because just for quick background for me, just real quick, I am Eastern Orthodox, and our idea of salvation isn't about go out and get people saved, because I don't know if I'm saved. Within our faith, it really comes down to how are you treating others? What is the life you're leading here? Leave salvation, all those other things, up to God. It's how do we treat others? And of course, there's a lot more that goes into it. So within the Eastern Orthodox and churches like that, you don't find this as a whole. Of course, we could say these very hardline, abusive people. And I'll just try to bring up those kind of counterpoints, because as far as I've seen, and maybe Steve, because I don't deal with a lot of Young Earth Creationists, I get more of the street preachers and very angry people coming after me. But it seem like that to you guys, that it's just the type of Christianity really affects the way these people treat Young Earth Creationism, or am I wrong in that thinking?
Can you repeat that last part again?
The type of Christianity.
I do think the type of Christianity affects the way people think. Young Earth Creationism, to me, is a lot more of the cultist mindset, because when you see people leaving Young Earth Creationism, they get shunned. Now, there's always some kind of ostracization of any group. Let's be realistic. It just happens. It doesn't matter what religious organization you belong to. You leave the group, people are angry, there's bitter feelings. But there are some groups that are out there that basically say, you know what, you leave us, we don't talk to you anymore. Look at Scientology, right? If you leave Scientology, you are considered to be an enemy of the state to them, right? That is what a cult would do. See, at the Mormons, they don't do that. I mean, yes, they disfellowship, but it's not exactly the same thing like Jehovah's Witness disfellowship. When a Jehovah's Witness disfellowships, they shun you. You are banned. You can't be talked to. They will spit on your grave, kind of thing. And Mormons, they don't believe in the hell per se. They don't say, look, be Mormon or you're going to hell. They do believe in different levels of heaven. They believe in a telestial, terrestrial, and celestial level of heaven. But that they don't sit there and go, well, you have to be Mormon or you're all going to burn in eternity, right? Because I don't believe in burning for eternity. I don't believe that that's actually even what Scripture even teaches. I think that was added on much later because they were trying to find a method to get people to believe in the way they wanted them to believe, and the best way to do that is fear. So... yeah, I do think
you've got a broad range of doctrines in denominations. If you look just as anti-evolutionism, a heavy amount of Young Earth Creationism in, say, Southern Baptists, but you also have little niche markets in Lutherans, and you have some Methodists that have some Young Earth and geocentrist camps. But if you look at anti-evolution more generally, you've got Presbyterians like Philip Johnson, I think, comes from that background, and Bill Dembski and others that come from mainstream denominations, that they're adopting a lot of those culture camp issues. And that's what does the thing. We have a thing, views about human evolution by religion.
Yeah, which I have up right now. And that's the whole thing, is that, what you're pointing out, James, is exactly right, is that there are, there's a huge variety between the different types of Christianity as far as their views on evolution go. And this is a Pew poll that's been out for a long time. And what you can see here is basically it's the white evangelical Protestants who, are the most Young Earth Creationists. And after that, it's actually most Christians are not Young Earth Creationists. They think humans have evolved over time. And the thing about this Pew poll that I actually point out to Joe Cenkowski when we had our last debate, is this is only accounting for that 60% there.
Yeah, although I'm not so concerned about young Earth creationism per se, because the underlying methodology of non-young Earth creationist anti-evolutionists is indistinguishable.
You're
So
right.
they're all,
it can be.
They're all just as bad. They just parse what they want to think about.
You're right.
And you've also got hyper-conservatives, your Pat Buchanans and Weemup Buckley's in the intelligent design movement. Conservative
Buckley is a perfect
traditional.
example, right? Yeah.
By the way, Pat Robertson, he's a fundamentalist, kind of a nutter, but even he accepts evolution, and he accepts old Earth to a point.
Yeah, he's not a young Earth creationist.
He's definitely not a young Earth creationist.
And of course he has.
He accepts evolution to a point. I think he believes that the soul is embodied at a certain point, but he does accept that the Earth is billions of years old.
Yeah,
and you have to. If you accept the Earth is billions of years old, most people are going to accept there's some kind of evolutionary processes going on, because how do you explain extant species if not?
Oh no, Pat Robertson never gets close to think of any of that stuff. His map of time. There's an awful lot of people. William Jennings Bryan was a perfectly fine example. He technically is an old Earth creationist. But when you talk to him about Bible events and the flood and Adam and Eve, he's still thinking in a 6,000-year frame. And he couldn't be dislodged from that. So Robertson is one of those squishy creationists that thinks that something happens sometime in the past. Don't really bother about it.
Yeah, no, that might be true.
And I've never seen Pat Robertson get close enough to a map of time to make any details. So yeah, he's not a young Earth creationist, but it don't matter much.
Mithridates joined us. Myth is actually doing his rounds or something, so let's get him in here real quick because I don't have too much longer. But hey, Myth, you've been listening while you're been doing whatever you do over there, or you're gonna keep me muting and ignore me.
Hey,
there you go.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm on my iPad, so I'm not quite used to the controls. How's it going? Good discussion. I haven't been listening too long, but it's good.
Yeah, you kind of missed the beginning where we kind of went over to some of Joe's claims. We didn't get into a lot of his claims. I thought we'd get into a lot more, but it kind of the thing took a turn in a different direction.
Well, we don't really need to, do we?
No, really. I think people kind of realize that this guy Joe has some of the most asinine claims out there, and it's comical. I mean, we actually enjoy just listening, in this case, reading, and Twitter. I've actually listened to him on Ash's channel, but
he's like Alex Jones at a lower decibel level.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, you just sit back and go, "What the hell is he saying? What? You think he thinks that there's a species of monkeys that should have existed that it reproduced asexually? How does that work?"
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, that was one of his claims, that if evolution was true, we would expect to see asexual monkeys.
Do I have to put that on again?
I think Myth believes us.
What are some of his other claims, real quick?
That all the chickens that are ever been came from 2 roosters that came off the ark.
That birds fossilized in the air, and that's why they're at higher level.
Birds fossilized in the air.
That's a neat one. Yeah, that air fossilization is so common in flood geology.
Oh my God. So basically, the flood happened. Wait, the flood happened, and during the flood, birds were fossilized in the air during the flood.
That's why you find them in the higher levels, man.
Oh, fuck my life.
Yeah, and that's one of what clearly he's making this stuff up as he goes along, because that is not a young Earth creationist concept. That no John Woodmarapp is ever going to say that.
Right, but Joe he's entrenched in this stuff. It's not like Joe, doesn't buy into this shit. He really does. I mean, he wrote a freaking book, for God's sake, or tried to. It's complete crap. But I mean, he actually does.
He's writing a book. That's why it took him 9 months.
He's writing another one.
The debate that was supposed to happen.
Oh God.
Yeah. Well, his books are reproducing asexually.
they're budding. How do these people get to this level where they think that people are going to listen to their stuff and go, "Oh yeah, this guy's genius. I'm going to read this book and I'm going to be enlightened so much by it." How do they get to that this lack of self-awareness?
Okay, getting back to that, remember that Joe really got pissed off when the town he's living in would not allow him to open up his church to spout this stuff.
Wow,
think about that.
When a community tells you you fucked up to have a church, that's pretty bad.
Exactly. When the community tells you that no, you cannot take over this derelict building that no one is living in right now and is not making any income as far as taxes go. You can't take this over and renovate it and make your own creationist church. That's when you know you're not a good creationist.
Yeah. I'm. By the way, I just talked to Wyatt Minkus just a few minutes ago. I'll be talking to him tomorrow. He hasn't given me much details yet, but he's working with Theo, just FYI, and he said he's ready to have a conclusion about Hovind, and so I don't. But he won't tell me right now. He wants to talk to me on the over the phone. But he said he might put an article up about Kent, but I don't know where he stands on it. Anybody know? I mean, anybody's talked to Wyatt where he stands on Kent nowadays because of all this stuff that's been going on?
True Logic just came out with a new video on Kent Hovind.
True Logic is Young Earth Creationist.
I'm sorry. Here, I'll post it.
Okay. Yeah, because True Logic 1... Oh, you're talking about True Logical 1. He's a Young Earther, isn't he?
I'm sorry. Logic.
Oh, Logic.
Yeah,
Logic just came out with a video on... Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's really good.
I haven't even talked to True Logic for so long that when he just reappeared recently, it was like, why is he even talking to me again? So maybe he'll come on.
I don't think I've engaged with him. I might have. I've and Logic himself. I tweeted him maybe once or twice, but Logic doesn't really get down to this level. I mean, he's the kind of like the the cream of YouTube kind of thing. So he doesn't associate with us peons down here.
I know. He wants his subscribers.
I like Logic's videos.
True Logic, on Twitter. I've got him listed as a Young Earth Creationist, and Hovindista believes that bats are kind. That's my notes on him.
Even though the Bible in Leviticus says that all the fowls or birds list a bat under that. So wouldn't the bat be under the bird kind according to Leviticus?
Yeah, we have to remember that in the time just before Darwin, as all these guys were going around sailing on ships and finding things, there was an explosion of the number of species that they had. There were only like 1,000 animals or so that they thought of as animals in the biblical context. Suddenly there were tens of thousands, 100,000, 500,000, a million. The species just kept going and going and going. And by the time Marsh comes along in the creationism movement in the 1940s, where he's trying to come up with baraminology, already there were way too many stuff available. And I'll give the baraminologists props for trying, but boy, the field just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger between.
Yeah, and what is it? 99% of all the species that we don't even know we don't even know most species. We have like 1% of all the species of the Earth.
Yeah, and the ones we do have are just don't fit in any of those creationist boxes. Yeah,
you can't pigeonhole, and that's why you'd have to have so many different kinds to be completely untenable. I mean, it's so impossible, and God bless them for trying. I mean. But again, you can't run science to try to find evidence to fit your hypothesis. When the evidence is conclusive that your hypothesis is wrong, you find a new hypothesis. But see, they don't have hypothesis. They have literally a precept that they have put as a conclusion.
And it's worse. It's not even their own presupposition. It's one that was handed down to them from previous times that they've decided is going to fit come hell or high water.
Right.
Even if they don't understand it.
And that's the big thing. And they don't. Like, Joe is a prime example of that. Joe does not understand anything. Anything. It's like you pick a topic. I've listened to him pontificate on different things. It's like, Joe, you don't even grasp the basics. So you have not refuted evolutionary theory. You're not a great intellectual mind of our time. You're not going to be going down as Einstein. It's just not going to happen, Joe.
Let me ask you a quick question.
These kind of people know nothing, but they speak with such an air of,
don't they?
Authoritativeness.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Doubt is something you don't get the slightest hint of doubt in Kent Hovind. There is a man who bubbles with confidence.
It's so funny though when I look at when I look at what somebody has to study to become whatever field they want to have their proficiency in, right? And I look at that kind of level of technological proficiency, I'm in awe, right? When I see people doing complex quantum mechanics or partial differential equations. Yeah, I can recognize it. I know what PDEs are. I know I've worked with them a little bit, but have no proficiency in them whatsoever.
And I'm not going to be able to do what they can do.
Yeah, exactly. I can't do what they do. And yet these people that don't even know what the fuck even a derivative is, thinking they somehow are geniuses. I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Let me ask something. Has anyone know any Young Earth Creationists who aren't believers of Sola Scriptura, which personally Sola Scriptura appears its own bag of worms, but who doesn't follow the idea of Sola Scriptura, who is a Young Earth Creationist?
That's I know of. Matt Slick doesn't?
Isn't Matt Slick one?
I don't know.
Oh, no, he does.
Yeah.
He is Sola Scriptura.
I think he is. I think he is. Yeah.
So is the question
I
a Young Earther that doesn't follow Sola Scriptura?
Yeah, someone who is who believes in your creationism but doesn't believe in sola scriptura. Because pretty much all the ones I've ever found always follow sola scriptura.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Well, the problem with that is that there are so many young Earth creationists out there who want to say that, oh, I'm a young Earth creationist, but I believe in intelligent design because it's such a catchphrase, right? And they don't understand that the intelligent design people don't accept it. Because the intelligent design people say that, oh, it's just all an allegory, and it happened over billions of years.
Most of them do, not all of them. There's different camps within different things, right? You can't just lump them all in one group. There's different camps of design intelligent designers, and but most of them will be like, oh yeah, look at evolution happens. We can go back billions of years, but you know what? We're going to show that God did it this way.
Yeah, exactly.
Intelligent design and young Earth creationism can cohabitate with one another is because neither one of them have a functioning map of time in their heads. Steve Meyer can literally write a paper with 2 young Earth creationists on the Cambrian explosion, and clearly it never came up. Oh, I'm sorry. I do keep stepping on Ash. I'm sorry.
No.
Go ahead. No, finish your thing, James. I just pointing out that there's a little bit of lag going on, and I noticed people are stepping each other. It's not that it's intentional. We're not a like true empiricism room where when that happens, it's like, oh my God, you interrupted me, I'm gonna kill you. It doesn't. We understand there's lag. We understand there's people on phones. So like Myth, I can barely hear Myth half the time.
That Steve Meyer is writing this paper on the Cambrian explosion, and for 2 of the authors, the Cambrian is 500 million years ago, and for 2 of the authors, it's 4,500 years ago, and at no point are they ever like comparing notes to figure out which one of those is true. The fact that they can do that is how young Earth creationism can be co-opted so easily by young Earth creationists without busting the gut.
Yep,
exactly, which is what you brought up before as well. We talked about that. They really cannot, they can't contradict each other. Because if they do, the whole web just falls apart. Because then everyone could not agree on the dates that they're trying to say things occurred at. They can't do that because they have no evidence to back it up anyway. But they can't do it because, once they start, arguing with one another, once Answers in Genesis starts arguing with, any other group out there, the whole web falls apart, and they realize that they're just going to contradict each other. And
I think that might eventually happen. I think they're going to be scrambling at one point, and they're going to be eating their own, because that's what we've noticed with a lot of the evangelical and fundamental Christians. And thank you, EOist. He put $7 Canadian, which I think is like $3.50 or $3 in American.
No,
it's something like that. No, I think so.
My parents just came down from Canada, man. They had a pretty good exchange rate.
No, I think it's like...
You have had schisms in creationism before. And Ronald Numbers went into a lot of that in his history of it. And the Answers in Genesis bunch fission, but it wasn't over doctrine, it was over control. Because Ken Ham was extremely...
Oh, it's $5 US.
Branch fusion knocked to him, and they're now...
It's a good exchange rate.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's $5. Wow. Hey, every bit of it helps, man. I mean, I do appreciate the super chat. Very, very much so.
See, the thing is, I had never heard of that Cambrian explosion happening 4,500 years ago, and my brain hurts now.
Oh, yeah, well, flood geology requires that. All fossil record is only 4,500 years ago in the flood for all practical purposes.
Yeah.
Brain hurts my head.
Well, and that's why, though, I had tweeted to Ash earlier. I said something along the lines of, look, out of 100 young Earth creationists, I know one will be, have the balls to actually come engage, and out of those, 99 that won't, or that 1% that will, 99% of them are crazy, right? So it's like I need to find people that are young Earth creationists that are not crazy. I do know a few, like White Minkus. He's a young Earth creationist. He's not crazy. He's a nice kid. He's articulate. He's intelligent. He sucks at presuppositionalism, but he's a nice guy. And he's definitely not crazy. And those are the kinds of people that I want to reach out to, that I'm looking for to have conversations with. I don't like the extremists. I don't like the radicals. I don't like the nut jobs. When I get people that say things like on my Facebook, oh, well, evolutionists believe that humans evolved from rocks, that's just a prat to me. I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to have anything to do with them, because I can't waste my time with people that are so fundamentally flawed to have them come in as guests, because who wants to listen to that? We've all heard the stupid shit like that before, right? I want a little bit higher quality young Earth creationist, and they're just nearly impossible to find. They really are.
It is, but here's the thing: is that if we do invite those people in, that are going to make these just outlandish claims. And then we're going to have some other people in the room who are a little bit more level-headed, and who might not be specifically atheistic in their views. Then it does tend to have things kind of level out, and then it's again, the whole thing that I think that we always need to bring up with these type of conversations is that creationism is not against science. Creationism is against a certain theology.
Right.
Creationism is attacking a different theological mindset from the other believer who might be the same religion that you are, and that's what's going on. There's the butting of heads of the conservative versus liberal Christians, if you want to put it that way, and that's why I brought up the Pew poll, because what it's really showing you is that most Christians, most theists, most people in the world accept what science presents to them as our explanation of a reality. It's accepted by the majority of the world. There's these really extremists, and these extremists come in every theistic form, and sometimes even atheistic, even though we really don't see those, even though creationists want to say they're out there. They come up and they say, no, this is the way that our religion presents it. And well, it's not your religion, first of all. And the other part is that, no, actually, most people in your religion don't accept what you're saying. They think you're nuts.
And that's the funniest part when they do that, when they eat their own. When I get, like the other day, like Arcane was talking about flat Earth in Antonio's live feed, and Antonio's like, I don't want to talk about this, but they're like, wait a minute. You guys are both Christians. You're both saying you have truth, and one espousing flat Earth, and the other one's like, that's bullshit. Exactly. It's like, how do you have such a huge difference in an ideological position there? That I mean, that same God could not have done it both ways. It's either one or the other. Either the Earth is round or the Earth is flat. What God do you want to ascribe to that?
And I think
I approach it from.
What's that, Myth?
Whenever you have a young earther on, will you ask them why they think that most flat earthers are Christian and creationists?
Good
That would be
question.
interesting to hear.
You're so light, and I can't hear that. What?
Yeah, sorry, dude.
No, I can hear. No, I can hear you now. I turned you up. What?
Okay. I said next time you have a young earther on, ask them why they think that most flat earthers are Christian.
What? Next time I have a young earther on, ask them why they think most flat earthers are Christian. I think the whole flat Earth movement. I think they just want to feel special. I think it's more than just pigeonholing their religious beliefs, right? I think they're just more than just, I'm going to read the Bible fundamentally and say, look, the Earth is flat. I think it's they want to feel like they know something that the rest of humanity don't, because everyone that I've ever met, and James here can testify to that, every single one of them, without exception, is dumber than a fucking box of rocks.
Yeah. There are subset. There's a pecking order. Young Earth creationism is a relatively recent phenomenon. Comes from the 1920s initially, and then it's crystallized in the 1960s.
Which I brought up in my debates with Joe as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Geocentrism has actually lasted quite a bit longer. It's a subset of that same culture. And then the flat earthers are kind of a niche market within that geocentric frame. The funniest thing to ever read is Answers in Genesis taking on geocentrists like Malcolm Bowden or Gerardus Boo. Because suddenly the young Earth creationist is functioning like the very methodological naturalist that they despise in every other method.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny. The young Earth creationists go against flat earthers. It's one of the funniest things in the world, because it's like are they listening to their own arguments? Because everything they've shown against flat Earth, they need to apply to themselves.
And I was just about to bring up.
And they'll never see it.
I was just bringing up that same exact thing with when you have Christian creationists attacking Muslim creationists. It's the same thing. They're arguing with one another, and all of a sudden, the Christian creationist, because of the language barrier, is bringing up all these arguments that are like straight from science. And it's like, wow, you're finally like accepting science. Oh, but you're only doing so to attack the Muslim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Good question on Paul Nelson. Paul Nelson is a young Earth creationist, and the intelligent design movement knows full well, and he's written stuff on young Earth creationism, and I peg him as that in my data sheet. But they never, ever, ever in any of their apologetics ever mention it.
Yeah, the question was, please ask your guest, it's by EO, please ask your guest if they've seen where Paul Nelson, ID creationist, believes the world is at less than 10K. I have no idea.
Yeah, there's a three. J.P. Moreland did an anthology. I think it was around 1999 or so, where there was an old Earth creationist, an intelligent design, and young Earth creationist, and they all wrote papers. Paul Nelson was reflecting the young Earth creationist position, and he's never changed, as far as I know.
I'll have to look that up.
And people in the live feed are pointing out that a lot of the young Earth creationists are posed. Somebody actually said they were all posed. No, I don't think they're all posed. I think some people are just that stupid. But yeah, a large percentage are. I think like Orphan Red, I think she's a Poe. I think Pillbox is a Poe. I think Arcane's a Poe. Yeah, there are people that want to elicit responses from people, and they like trolling. And I think that's a vast majority of the young Earthers. Unfortunately, because you have people that are just so goddamn stupid, they will buy into it. And we do see those. Spurkismo is a perfect example. I don't think Spurkismo is trolling. I think he literally is that dumb. You guys may not know who he is, but...
One on the end asked if YEC is a dying trend. Nope. Yeah. It's very much a persistent trend. It's about 45% of the American population has remained as such, and I don't see it fizzling away. In fact, it's the dominant form of anti-evolutionism in the country. More people believe that than believe in intelligent design as a narrow niche.
It is the dominant. I was just about to comment on this as well from Immutable Destiny, but I think it is a dominant trend, but I think it is dying off purely because it's generational. And I think what's going on right now is that you have this generation growing up, this younger generation that is very keyed into technology, and they know they can find the information, they can fact check. So I would say that yes, it is dominant right now in as far as the people who are anti-evolution. Of course, we do have those people who are not necessarily anti-evolution; they still accept it, but they're like the Pew poll shows that they accept that evolution happened over millions of years, or billions of years even. But that it was guided by a force. I don't really consider those people necessarily anti-evolution. It's just that they're based in their theology off of a different mindset. We can call those people like theistic evolutionists. But still, is YEC dying? Yes, it is. Young Earth Creationism is really dying. And one of the main reasons is that these young people who do have this access to the information on the internet are leaving theism because they don't accept how anti-science it is, and that's been shown over and over again. There's many people out there. There are many younger people. Gen Xers have always been brought up as the, largest generation to do this, but they are leaving Christianity, and maybe it might not be for atheism, but they're leaving it because they see it as being anti-science.
That's a brilliant point. And yeah, I've seen that actually. We have people like Mike J, Isaiah Sloan, Apologia. There's a list of people that were ex-Young Earth creationists that have now become atheist because they felt like they were lied to, but they actually got a hold of information. We have literally at our fingertips more information than we ever had in the history of mankind.
Within a year.
Can you imagine with this technology 40 years ago? Let's think about that. If you were a kid, hang on one sec, Ash, if you were a kid, if you were like your precocious 13, 14-year-old that you probably were, like I was already doing programming, and I was supposed to be the smartest guy in the class kind of shit. Can you imagine if you had the internet at 14? You would have had 3 doctorates by now kind of shit, right?
And unfortunately, I have to just point out that when I was like 13 and 14, my father was working for Hewlett Packard. And this was 1983, and I did have access to the internet, and maybe that's why. Vancouver.
Yeah, that's when I was just starting, I guess, right when you had to
exactly. We were in the Vancouver, Washington Hewlett Packard plant. He was bringing home these prototype computers, and we were hooking up to the ARPANET.
The ARPANET, yeah.
Doing stuff on our Commodore 64 and 128. But yes, that's when I really realized that all this information is out there at my fingertips, and I really started getting into reading and. A whole world just expanded. These kids, and I'm talking about my students who, that's the age they were at, and I'm just talking about my perception of when it really changed for me. Like the perception of the world. My students see that, and it's so natural to them that when I bring up a subject in class, they get on the computers. And within, like a day, we're talking about the same subject again, and they're saying, "No, but I looked this up, and you're wrong." They want to prove me wrong.
They want to do research, and that's good.
Yes, but exactly, and they want to learn. They want to have input, and they want to talk about it. They want to learn more.
But this is, it's funny. It's in the live feed. This is what I run into when people say things like this, like Media Truth Watch said, "Theism is an anti-science. What a straw man." Well, by saying that, he's straw manning because nobody's ever said theism is anti-science. We're talking about young Earth creationism is anti-science. And that's what when people throw these things out there like, oh, you're straw manning me, you're not even using it correctly because no, we're not. Nobody's said theism is anti-science. That's be wrong. You know, there's a lot of people that are theists that are very much pro-science. But young Earth creationism, but young Earth creationism by its very nature is anti-science, right? And so
theism
how does
is not anti-scientific.
what's that myth?
Theism isn't anti-scientific at all, but young Earth creationism is.
Right. And so how do you conflate the two? How do you listen to what we're saying, and then in your brain, like whatever is going on in there, spin it around like a blender and spew out theism isn't anti-science when nobody's ever made such an argument? I don't get it.
And it could just be that young Earth creationism is a subsect of theism in a way. So that
Sure.
kind of be the correlation that they're using for it.
But that would be very bad skills at critical thinking, right? Because we're not applying this myopic set of theists to all the entire group, right?
And of course it's bad critical thinking, but then again, look at the group we have to deal with on a weekly basis. I
Yeah.
look at Anchor, holy crap.
The common thread that you find, with both creationism and intelligent design relates to human origins. That's the thing that sticks in people's craw.
Yeah, they don't like to have to admit that evolutionary theory is a model that works. They don't want to have to admit that we have things that go back thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands, and humans go back millions of years. They don't want to have to accept that. And yeah, the earliest humans were about 2 million years ago. They weren't modern humans, but they were, hominids.
But again, remember the whole reason that we even have young Earth creationism is going back to the Seventh-day Adventists and Ellen White saying that she was there at the Seventh-day creation event with Jesus and witnessed it in real time. And that's where it all stems from. And that's why it was called flood geology.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea to begin with was not to say that evolution was wrong. It was to say that there's actually evidence for a flood, and here's what it is, and we're going to base everything off of that one piece of evidence because the Bible must be history. So it's
Well, the chronology issue was a handy dodge because it is fair to say that if you don't have hundreds of millions of years to play with, you're not going to do natural branching speciation.
And that's why you're right, and that's why
creation compressed everything down to a 6,000-year frame. Boom, you short-circuited evolution at the source.
Right, and that's why young Earth creationism, at its essence, is not based off of refuting evolution. It is based off of refuting physics and geology and chemistry as far as the age of the Earth and the age of the universe.
Well, flat Earth's the same way. They think if flat Earth's true, it somehow will negate evolutionary theory, right? And by the way, they said he said no. Scientia did. I don't remember him saying that. I'm pretty sure that if I ask Ash, are you clarifying for the video? Are you saying? Did you say that all theists are anti-scientific, or just young Earth creationist? Ash, because they said that you said that theism, and I don't remember you saying that, but I'm pretty damn well sure that you're specifically referring to only young Earth creationist.
No, I'm not even saying. I'm saying that, which I've always said on my Twitter feed, is that creationism. When I say creationism, I'm specifically talking about young Earth creationism. Is actually a cult in Christianity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So no, I know. Like I was saying earlier, I had college professors that were devout Christians. Who taught me evolutionary biology, and that's the funniest thing, is that no, I know that there's a difference between science and religion, and as far as the field of evolution goes specifically, that's not something that even most Christians actually even think about as being in debate. They don't think it's in debate because they understand the scientific way that we explain the world around us, and it has nothing to do with their understanding of their relationship to Christ and whatever else, their theology that they built.
Yep.
Another good question there from the one on the end who I can never remember because there's no thing symbol up on there, but asked about where abiogenesis is such a focus with YEC. It's not just young Earth creationists, it's intelligent designers. Origins arguments are the way of short-circuiting evolution at the start. But from their logic, all they have to do is to dig their heels in and say life cannot originate naturally, and bingo, they've solved the problem, and they don't have to bother about dinosaurs and bird evolution and reptile mammal transition and anything else.
But it doesn't. It doesn't negate all the evidence for evolution. Even if you found intelligent design was true, even if you found God, and God, you say, God created everything, that doesn't magically just negate all the evidence we have that the Earth is billions of years old in evolution. They think I know they do. But that's what they want other people to think.
French anti-evolutionists were doing that at the time of Darwin, and to some extent, German evolutionists fell into the same bag, that they wanted to figure out how life originated. And if they couldn't figure that out, then they were kind of stuck. Where it was the British Darwin-Wallace tradition that they said, forget the origins question. Look at what happened now and work our way back from that, and don't bother about the origins thing.
Yeah, that's where the neo-Darwinian synthesis came from.
Yeah, and I'm not a neo-Darwinist either, but it's no different. Hey, Ash, if I said, hey, if God is true, is that going to invalidate general relativity? No. No. I mean, God can say, hey, you know what? I made it look like this or whatever, but it doesn't distract from the fact that the model fucking works. Right?
But from an anti-evolutionist perspective, nothing is more attractive than origins or bust arguments, and they will use that as the rock to hop to, because natural theology is a real dangerous turf for them to play on.
Yeah. Which is what Joe was going to do. He was going to do a Hoven hop. He was going to do a Gish Gallop. He was going to come here and throw a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with actually evolution. It had to do with time scale.
Yeah.
Let me do.
Yeah, it's too bad that Joe couldn't join us. But yeah. Anyways, I got to start wrapping this up because I do got to get going. I have to go to stores. I told you guys. It's a shame that Joe couldn't join us. We're going to keep trying just because, at this point, I'm not going to lie. If he does come on, it's going to be just purely to mock him. But we will address his claims, but I can't take Joe seriously. The fact that he dissed us, saying that he would be doing this for weeks, that he'd been planning this and blah, blah, blah. And, Ash was like, hey, we'll do it at Friday this time. Joe's like, yeah. And then all of a sudden he's like, well, I need 30 minutes of uninterrupted kind of gish galloping time. It's like, no, not going to happen.
Well, here's the other thing, and I just pointed this out today as well. I have offered him for like over a year now. It's been quite a while. I'll go on any Friday, and I'll talk with him personally. And if he wants to talk about, the Noachian flood, which is the only thing that he really seems to be interested in discussing, then we could do that. But I'd go into different subjects as well. But it's open for every Friday. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to wait seriously, almost a year between talking.
Yeah.
And because he's writing this book, that book, that masterpiece that he's going to come out with is just going to really flood us in so much information that we can't dispute Noah existed.
No, but they don't give information. All they say is, hey, there was a flood and it did this. It's just like when they say, oh, look at the water changed the decay rates. Yes. Okay, well, how does that happen? Oh, I don't know. Well, that's not fucking evidence. I can posit anything, but if you can't explain to me how water would change the decay rates, then I really don't care what your argument is because you have none. But anyways, guys, I'm wrapping this up. Myth, thanks for dropping in very much. I know that you're on a limited schedule there, and Mutable, and James,
Thanks,
and Ash, especially Ash. I know we don't get a chance to hook up often.
And we will more often.
I do. I love your stuff. I do. I love your tweets. People haven't been exposed to you as much as they should. You dropped in before a few times, and I do know a lot of people, guys. I mean, not everybody that I know is like part of our active community. So I've kind of reached out to people that I've known for a while or engaged with or had communications with that I think would be awesome to come in. This is how, Ash just came in, and we had Dr. Brett come in the other day. So I'm trying to get you the Patreons of my channel their money's worth, and people that do donate to the Super Chat and the PayPal. I want to get you guys your money worth by having great guests. So I really hope that you guys think that this was awesome, that we did have some great guests. This was a great conversation, which we'll continue on another time. Everybody's saying in the live feed, go watch some porn. Okay. So I can't. I got to go to the store. But if you guys want to go do that between watching this and watching Side Strike's hangout that starts in about an hour, go do what you got to do. I don't judge unless you. But I can really tell you this: if you do whack off between now and then, make sure that you are taking your zinc. Because I guess I found out that masturbation depletes zinc, makes you go bald. At least that's according to the pseudo-intellectuals on the Young Earth Creationist side and the intelligence design side that has been telling us that. So, okay, don't know how that works. But, hey, anyways, I'm going to give Ash as my guest the last shout-out. So go ahead and put your shout-out to your channel, and then I will end this particular hangout.
No, I don't think I need to. I'm just going to say thank you so much for inviting me. And, we'll do this again soon, and hopefully Joe will join us sometime. If not, again, he's always welcome to show up any Friday. I've got an open channel for him. We'll see what happens.
Awesome. And the link to Ash's webpage is video tube channel is on my link description. He got one sub during this, so come on, give him some more. And if James gives me the link to his tip stuff, I'll put them in as well. I also want to point out again, special thanks to my sponsor for this month, or at least for a while, Brian Sapient from the Rational Response Squad. That was very nice of him. So the links are there below too to get to atheist sites and things of that nature. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching. This was awesome hangout. Very much enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have a great night. And go watch Strike's channel. He does some really good debunkings at Friday at midnight Eastern every Friday. So anyways, I'm going to end it with that. Thank you guys, and good night.